edition of the Omnist Hour. Today, we're going to talk about something I've talked about before, but maybe in a little bit more focused way. This is kind of the result of a conversation I had with a young gentleman of the New Age high vibe love cult. I'm going to title this one Conversations with a High Vibe NPC, New Age Monkey Monks. Background art, if you want to talk about that for a second, let me read to you what the idea behind these pictures you see behind you is. Actually, I got a strike on this one. It said that Auto Review Board has forwarded my art to a human to see if it is appropriate or not. So I may have pissed off the gods of AI art. This picture you see is a couple of different ideas based on different art styles. The prompt 5 successive versions of Homo sapiens zombicus emerging from the previous one. Okay, so I'm going to be a little bit uncomplimentary toward folks of the New Age persuasion, because I see so many people in that tent who are becoming very much like some of the very, very dogmatically focused folks of past cults. Now, what do I mean by a cult? Okay. Let's review that, and so we're all on the same page. A cult is a religion that is basically so dogmatic that it admits of no possible error in their doctrine. Now, cults have existed for a long time. In fact, almost every organized religion takes on the aspect of a cult. This is how leaders gain power. They gain a cult following. And religions don't always have a spiritual basis. The cult of Hitler worship, the cult of Mao worship, the cult of Guru worship, are basically all cult religions. Another common characteristic of cult religions is their natural tendency to form a Marxist model of their way of life. And if you know anything about how Marxism works, you know it's about basically defining one group as the oppressed virtuous and another group as the oppressing unvirtuous, the oppressing non-believer, the oppressed believer. This is a meme of all cults throughout history. And this is why I term these religions as basically cult Marxism. Religions of power, religions of blind worship of some supreme power that happens to also be your best friend and buddy who will go to war for you and give you the victory no matter who you're fighting. This is cult Marxism at its root. It can have a religious stamp. It can have a a human stamp. It can have an ideological stamp. It can have a political stamp. And it has throughout history. Some of the famous cults of the past were the worship of the emperor. In the Roman times, the worship of Jesus, the worship of Allah, the worship of God as a supreme deity that favored our faith over anybody else's because we believed in the right version of what is a Trinity. We believed in the right version of what is Sharia law, what is the Quran, the right version of what is the Torah, if you're of a Jewish cult mentality. So this goes throughout history and is now being manifested in new ways. In New Age ways, which, interestingly enough, if you map them out, have a very similar shape to some of the extreme cults of the past. Some of the cults, I'm not going to go into all of them, but I'm going to compare ones that might be most familiar to most of my listeners who were probably of a Christian background or familiar with the Western historical record. I'm not meaning to offend anybody who happens to gravitate towards other cults. Everything I'm going to talk about today applies to the cults of Islam, the cults of Buddhism, the cults of Hinduism, the cults of communism, capitalism, nationalism, Nazism, fascism. All of these big ideas are cults. Globalism is a cult. And you can basically draw up your own table to describe that cult's belief. We'll get close to him in talking about some of the New Age cults. And I think you'll be able to see the ties between the poles of New Age dogma and some of the poles of more political dogma that are being pushed these days. Okay, so let's move over to a little spreadsheet I put together. Okay, so what we're going to do here is comparing some old and new cult Marxist organizations. The old ones I'm going to look at are some of the very, very extreme and exclusive organizations of the Catholic tradition, Catholic Christian tradition. And then I'm going to contrast that with some of the poles that are very similar in the New Age tradition. And then look at, okay, well, Rob, why is what you're telling me not just a new cult? And that will maybe help you understand what Omnism is versus other kinds of philosophies, ideologies, or religions. Okay, so in the old age Catholic tradition, the first order of monks were the Benedictine monks, followers of Saint Benedict. And these cats took their Christianity so seriously that they decided, you know what, we can't live within the confines of normal society. The people are just too evil and wicked, and the only way that we can really serve God is by going off by ourselves and forming a brotherhood. And that's where things started with brotherhoods. There were later on sisterhoods of abbeys that sort of mirrored the monastery of the brotherhoods, where women could congregate and worship God or follow God the way that women chose to, separating themselves from men, which is an interesting corollary to what seems to be going on today. Okay, so let's compare these. The second one is sort of the Templar Jesuit tradition. This would be the militant Catholic who basically didn't want to withdraw from the world. They wanted to change the world to make it the perfect vision of what a Christian world should be, which meant that they fought with it, they interacted with it, they pushed their ideas. This is sort of the missionary zeal version of Christianity. Now, we're then going to look at this in contrast with a couple of poles of New Age religions, which tend to be godless. Postmodernism has introduced the idea, well, we don't need a God. We can make our own gods, or make ourselves gods, or make science a god, or whatever. This is a characteristic of all these newer religions, cults that have been spawned since, basically the time of Marx and Voltaire and the 19th century Enlightenment, if you will. One major pole is what I refer to as the high vibe love cult. I think you've met some of these people that basically they might even say they're Christian, but they define being a Christian as love. God is love, Jesus is love, all you need is love, blah, 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 blah. Or you'll see the outgrowth of the 60s hippie culture, high vibes, do what feels good, blah, blah, blah. If somebody is in your way, feels bad, they're low vibration, etc., etc. The other pole is what I call the Teslarian, or Scientological transhumanist cult. These are ones that want to change society, not withdraw from it and say, well, anything that's not love is not real. They just haven't got with the program yet. We're not going to touch them because they'll infect us, if you will. Very, very similar to the idea of the Benedictines, in fact. This other general group wants to change humanity, believes that we can, through whatever hocus pocus, modify our DNA, either physically with genetic modification science, or spiritually through some sort of alchemy of transformation to make humans better beings, more like what their ideal is. And of course, everybody has a different ideal of what would be an ideal human, and there are, even within this sort of general category, groups that are actually fighting each other. Those that believe you can do this spiritually are very much opposed to those that believe you can do it with technology. Okay, so I think that's... and then the final column here is going to be kind of me explaining what the Omnist approach to all of this is. So who's the supreme being here? Well, in the Catholic tradition, although it's Christian, I think there's a general acknowledgement that God is like the Father. That's the whole point of Christianity. There's this Trinity thing where there's this cat Jesus who is, I mean, it's one of the major disputed points of Christianity is, was Jesus a god? Was he human? Was he half human, half god? This never really got resolved well and has been the source of a lot of the schisms, heretical beliefs that were persecuted by the Catholic Church. What is the nature of the Son? What is the nature of the Holy Spirit? What is the nature of God? But in general, these old age religions put God above everything else as the supreme being. The high vibe love cult, basically their idea of a supreme being is, they call it the universe. The universe wants this, the universe wants that. You hear a lot of these folks talking in that way. And this is their way of making God them. So basically what they do is they remove the separation between them and God, and we are God. We are one universal consciousness having this weird masturbation fantasy experience in the human body. And they talk about returning to the source. And the source being this infinite love, this highest vibration that is the ideal of the universe. Okay. The god of the Teslarians, it's a very humanist cult, but worshiping the ideal human, not the current human. At least not the current human except for me, which, because I'm so smart and I believe this cult, I am, by definition, one of these advanced humans that deserves to get the latest upgrades and keep becoming more advanced than anyone else. They have this idea of some universal laws of mathematics and physics, which are somehow hidden by the cabal. And there's a lot of conspiracy theories going around in this group about all the great things that the ancients had, the technology that the ancients had that were lost and hidden to control us and use us. And they talk with terms like the cabal. These are the folks that see the enemy as the reptilians and so forth. Yeah, interesting bunch of folks. Now, the Omnist approach to this is that basically everything is part of a multiverse, many universes, which are the result of a creative experiment, an evolving creative experiment that, because it involves souls and souls are conscious, souls have personalities, have interests and likes and dislikes. To make this game, this experiment work, it needs to be a game. And this is essentially what is going on. This is a grand experimental game, a virtual reality designed to let souls develop their own path, their own sub-games within this bigger game. And of course, if you know anything about virtual reality games, especially ones played online, massive multiplayer games, you know that one of the things that's important to have is different universes where players who like to play together can play in peace without being affected by other players. So, you know, if you go to any real popular online game, you will find that there are universes geared towards high-end players, very experienced, very advanced players who want to be challenged by each other. And even amongst those, there may be some who are geared towards very violent play, adversarial play, and others who are geared towards cooperative play. And a well-designed game will provide those environments as the need arises. Now, what's the point of all this? Well, in the online gaming, physical gaming area, the technology that we develop, and the point is making money, obviously. And how do we make money with a game? Well, we get a lot of people playing it and investing in looking at the advertisements that they're getting, or the tokens that they're buying to improve their ability to play the game. And there's all sorts of ways that you can appeal to their ego to get them to buy stuff. Games oriented towards female players tend to be have their extra stuff focused on appearance. Oh, I want my character to be wearing the most wonderful outfit and be so impressive and have a wonderful pet to carry along with me to show my status. Or other perks, things that you can buy or acquire in an online game would be, special powers, extra lives, extra hit points, extra attribute points, etc. And that's essentially how the soul game works. Only in the spirit world, the world of pure thought, there's not really any currency except for knowledge. Proven knowledge. Now, how do you prove knowledge? You have to test it. Any scientist will tell you that you have to propose a theory, you have to design an experiment, and you have to test it. And this is essentially what the first soul did. The first conscious being, entity, soul, began creating this game. It started very simply with the creation of the first other soul. Okay. Now, this interestingly enough is an idea that's very consistent with what we know about reality from the world we observe around us. It matches what we've done, what we have naturally done with our society, with our games, with our culture, with our religions, trying to evolve a better system to reward those that we believe deserve to be rewarded. And, there are flaws with that system. We're rewarding people who are doing very dystopian things, like creating social media chambers, virtual reality games, which may have been tested enough to prove that they can be virally popular, but are not tested enough, or no effort put into making sure that they're not actually doing long-term harm to the people involved in them, both the players and the creators. And this is the downfall, I guess, of our species, is being stupid enough to think that we know better than the gods, know better than God what is good for humanity. Who is the adversary? Who do we hate? And yes, indeed, the oneness cult does have people that they hate. Now, in the Benedictine era, it was, Satan and the pagans and heretics and infidels, basically anyone who didn't believe Christianity the way you did. And they argued over the silliest little things, how many angels could fit on the head of a pin, whether angels were gods or whether they were more like saints, whether saints existed or the revered dead were just dead, whether you had any life after death. etc., etc. These were all very open issues at the beginning of Christianity, and gradually became very dogmatic in very in either splitting sects or sects that became persecuted to extinction. And again, the Templars and Jesuits pretty much had the same idea, but maybe with a different spin, depending on who their subordinate deities were. Little known fact about almost all Christianity is that it wants to become a polytheistic religion. In essence, it is by virtue of having a trinity. And this is what, Muslims see as a very big problem with Christians, is that you've got three gods. That's sacrilege. You can only have one. And he's got one prophet. Okay. Despite the fact that Muhammad didn't say anything of the kind. He said that, in fact, Jesus was a prophet, one of the great prophets. And there would be more prophets, and a whole line of prophets. And this was just a continuation of a line of prophets that were recorded in the Old Testament. And this is why, in general, Muslims and Jews have gotten along better than Jews and Christians, or Christians and Muslims, because their religion is actually closer in its dogma. Who do the high vibe love cult see as the adversary? Well, of course, low vibe people. How many times have you seen one of these people say, "Oh, they're so low vibration, I can't stand being around them. We have to put up with them because we love them, but oh, I wish they could raise their vibration." Negative people? "Oh, they're so negative, I can't have them in this world. They're lowering my vibration by being around me. I've got to distance myself from them." And basically anyone that doesn't accept being part of their one. This really blows their mind when they find somebody that says, "No, I'm not part of your one. I will never be part of your one. I absolutely reject your one. Your one is a cult. It is a hive mind. And I don't want to be part of a hive mind. I don't want to have my thoughts dictated and controlled by a program." The enemies of the Teslarians, basically they see anybody that denies science, denies progress, the ones that just aren't smart enough to know what's going to be the future. And this is a pretty popular cult. Even, it's basically the woke cult is this cult now. The people that listen to what they're told on commercial media, do what they're told by commercial media, believe commercial media, whatever their particular favorite brand is. And commercial media dog food comes in many brands. It now comes in very religious cult brands. If you've ever heard of the Gaia channel, some of these other New Age channels that focus on this New Age spirituality, you will notice that they have very strong financial backing from the same people that are backing NBC, CBS, Fox, CNN, etc. It is all part of this big globalist media machine. And that is what it is. Now, in the Omnist way of thinking, the adversary is not really bad necessarily, but a contrary opinion of how souls should be governed. God's side thinks the soul should have free will, be able to have free thought, be able to come to their own conclusions and decide what to do given the circumstances of each incarnation, which is a virtual reality in all parts of the multiverse. Basically, the set of laws that give body to where is your reality. And it's all based upon mathematics, physics, chemistry, or upon whatever laws prevail in the universe you're currently in. And there are fantasy universes that give body to our dreams, give body to psychedelic experiences, give body to extreme spiritual experiences. And these other fantasy universes are effectively the spiritual universes, the heavens and the hells of the multiverse, the places where we go to plan another incarnation or to help in the planning of incarnation. So you can see the whole multiverse as kind of a huge collection of tribes, either focused on having experiences or being, the travel agents to help plan others' experiences while they're having an experience as a cosmic travel agent. And this has many levels of being aware of how this system works. Only really the folks that own their own universe and have control over their own universe, the God-level souls, really know how this game is working at the highest level. They're like the architects of the virtual reality, popular virtual reality games. They understand the mechanics of it. They design and conduct experiments that try to draw more people into their video game. Now, the top level game is the overall shell of the multiverse, which you can think of as a collection of universes, a universe made up of universes. So the adversary here is an entity I call Borg, because in the Star Trek universe, which is a good meme that most people are familiar with. I don't know, maybe the younger generation doesn't watch the original Star Trek, but it was a very, very wonderful show of the early TV era before it became highly propagandized and started excluding creators who were actually creative, who didn't toe the woke cult line, as it were. This Borg is essentially the spirit of authoritarian mind control and soul energy theft. So kind of like the master of the Matrix, if you will, the one who created the Matrix and envisions universes being best run by those who think like Borg, who think that all-powerful, almighty gods and goddesses are the best folks to master universes and to work on souls. And these followers of Borg are the Lord gods, the Lady Mother Earth, the Great Goddess, Lucifer, Lilith. All of these gods and goddesses of power run their universes in a very authoritarian manner, to the extent that, we think of as a very Orwellian way. They create a virtual reality for the souls that they capture that basically encourage spiritual energies to be generated through fear, through strong emotions of lust and envy and all those things that we know generate very, very strong emotions. Even spiritual ecstasy, which can be a very negative thing, even if you think it's positive. This love vibe, everybody has felt, I don't know, maybe you haven't, but I know that there are times where I feel this strong love vibe from my heart. And what I've noticed is that strong love vibe can be stimulated by both love and hate. In fact, I've measured my response, my heart's response to programming that I have, and in fact, the response is much stronger when I am feeling hate or revulsion or, really frustrated with somebody. And that's the point at which I know, you know what, this isn't good for me. I don't like this heart telling me what to think, what to do, because my soul is not my heart. If you think your soul is your heart, you are being programmed and run by this subsoul of your heart, or whoever programs that subsoul. And Borg entities love working through the heart because it's the easiest brain to control in a human being. It's harder to control this brain because it's actually two brains, a right and a left brain, who usually will have some disagreement over things. That's why when you're thinking about something, it can often seem like a 3 or more way conversation. It is. And if you are a conscious soul, you will know that you're making the decision independent of any of these voices, doing what you choose, evaluating all the information. And the more conscious souls tend to be somewhat hesitant. They don't act quickly. They don't make snap decisions. That's why they tend not to be the leaders of human organizations. They tend to be the advisors of healthy organizations, because the tribal leader needs to be the one who will go run into a battle, charge into a hopeless cause. And this is not something an advanced spiritual entity would do. This is low consciousness behavior. It's programmed behavior. And we need that because your enemy, whoever it is, the one who wants to take what you have, wants to control you, is going to use every means that they have at their disposal to outmatch you. Okay, so I think that gives you an idea of adversary. Essentially, if you're of a very low consciousness, you can see your adversary as those more conscious than you that try to manipulate and control you. If you're of a high consciousness, your adversary would be essentially yourself, and resisting your urge to control and manipulate those who have less power than you in order to get your way with your competition, others at the same level or a higher level of consciousness. This is the truth of souls. Souls have egos. The ego is the soul. You cannot separate an ego from a soul without basically taking away the identity of that soul. And those that choose to join this oneness cult are essentially abdicating their soul. And there are many oneness cults. The Benedictine order was essentially a oneness cult. It saw that, well, okay, I can't live within normal society, so I'm going to withdraw into this monastery and let the abbot, the head monk, decide what is right for everybody, make the rules, and et cetera, and just tell me what to do each day, when to pray, when to do this, when to do that, and this very much maps much of the Islamic tradition. I live in an Islamic country. I live in a Muslim family, and the general thought is that everybody, in order to be a good Muslim, must go through these rituals so many times a day, and it's very similar to the rituals of the Benedictine abbeys. Set times where you have to pray, set rituals, and there's nothing wrong with that. It serves as a reminder that there are some souls who work within a rigid set of laws, and that makes a world that they are better functional in. That's not necessarily a bad thing. It's good to realize that. It's not good to impose that on others who don't want to live in that ritual. And this is the dark side of most traditional religions, especially ones who have this cult Marxist point of view. It's my way or the highway. This is cult Marxism. It is a xenophobic approach to spirituality, to philosophy, that says, well, in order for my point of view to be valid, I've got to force it on everybody else. Otherwise, if I let it be challenged, I might have to accept a debate about some of my core beliefs and question them. And this would be uncomfortable for me, so I am going to basically build a wall between myself and any other religion, any other ideology, any other party. You see how this all ties together? Now, the Omnist chooses their walls. And this is something that the love cult really doesn't get. They think, well, we're all one. I should be able to just touch somebody and give them love, and they will give me love back. And, well, this is the lie of the law of attraction. It doesn't work. You can fake yourself into thinking it works, and, go on, oh, I'm giving love to everybody. And, they're not ready to receive the love. Okay, we'll give you love next time. Just don't steal my vegetables. Delusion. Who are some of the subordinate deities in these religions? In the Christian tradition, the subordinate deities, of course, Jesus, the Holy Spirit, saints and blesseds, and the main of these would be like the Virgin Mary, the Madonna, which now kind of is embodied by multiple goddesses: the Mother, the consort of Jesus, Mary Magdalene, the harlot, and then the idea of, well, maybe they had a child, and that child is carrying some special bloodline. This establishes a hereditary deity, which is very common through all of these cult Marxist religions of power. In the Templar Jesuit tradition, they had a very, very definite tie with the Virgin Mary, who they sort of saw as the embodiment of the Holy Spirit, and the Solomonic tradition of there being this uber-wise god king, Solomon, who had all this great knowledge that was hidden in the temple and got destroyed and taken away when the Romans destroyed the Second Temple. And in fact, the Templars, that was their goal, was to prepare the world for the Third Temple. This was continued with the Jesuits, who were a less militant replacement for the Templars, but basically served the same purpose. They worship Logos, the Holy Spirit, also known as Sophia. In the Eastern tradition, the Hagia Sophia is what the building was called. It's now the Great Mosque in Istanbul. This is basically worship, goddess worship. The Holy Spirit is a female entity. Always has been the focus of the female side of Christianity through the embodiment of the Virgin Mary, or Mary Magdalene, or the female saints and martyrs. In the high vibe love cult, the sub-deities are these cats called the Ascended Masters, which is kind of like we pick and choose which of the Buddhist saints that we want to acknowledge, old or new, and call them, you know, these advanced pseudo-deities that have become one with the one and can manifest anything they want, anytime they want. This cult also sees Mother Nature as kind of a sub-deity. And actually, to some extent, they kind of make a religion of dehumanism, to the extent that they see the ego as something bad that you have to kill so you can be assimilated into the one. This is, to some extent, anti-humanist. It sees humanity as a disease, not as a cure. Which is, you know, just as bad as the other way around. Anybody that knows anything about human nature, about the wide range of personalities you meet amongst our species, knows that we're a mixed bag. Generally, it is the commonly held belief that most people are inherently pretty good. They'll do the right thing when it's obvious. But anybody who's honest will admit that, yeah, there are some people that are just messed up. They screw up other people's lives. They do the wrong thing. They will lie, cheat, steal, whatever, to get what they want. And there is evil. There is obvious evil that everybody ought to recognize, which kind of doesn't fit with the whole we are one idea. Duality is real. It's hard to define, but that doesn't mean it doesn't exist. The subordinate deities in Teslarian, well, obviously Tesla is a big deity of theirs. Einstein, militant humanism, those who put humanity's goals and interests above anything else. We have a manifest destiny to get to the stars and preserve our genetic code. The L. Ron Hubbard cult definitely falls in this area. And in general, the corporate globalist communist cult of the woke crowd, which is the prevailing cult of the world right now, all over the world, pretty much all accepted narratives from commercial media, from state media, follow some version of this cult. And the main differences are in who we define as sort of the best mafia, the ones who should be the leaders at the world table, who should be the dominant ones in the UN or in the World Economic Forum, or the country, the superpower that should be leading the world to a better place. Yeah, these cults are really pretty stupid when you think about it. Now, in the Omnist way of thinking, Every soul is a deity in progress. Not all are going to get to the highest level of consciousness where they are fully aware that they have their own universe of creation. And at low consciousness, your universe is very ephemeral. It appears for a moment when you're about to make a bad decision, and you get Mandela effect off to do what you decided to do. Meanwhile, a copy of you does what you didn't decide to do. And this is how the multiverse works. This is how the multiverse expands. Each soul eventually gets the chance to have their own complete separate universe. Or, in the meantime, they can play in the universes of various gods. The two most noteworthy, well, actually there's three very noteworthy after God and Borg, are the ones that embodied the first two universes. Remember, this is an experiment in creation. God didn't know if it was going to work. He had to sell the idea to his family because no soul has more power than any other, without convincing other souls to collectivize their power, their thoughts. Share their thoughts, share that power of the spiritual energy of thoughts, which is where spiritual energy comes from. It comes from concerted thought. The two souls that started this experiment were the ones that embodied the first two universes. The two universes that came out of the Big Bang, and I like to name those souls Lucifer and Lilith. Lucifer represented the God side of the conflict. Free will, freedom of choice, I can do what I want, when I want. Libertine position. Lilith represented the Borg side. We need to let somebody higher decide everything for us because we don't know everything. We need to ask for help from the supreme leader to guide us. These are the two poles of creation. The two original universes were kind of guided by these two souls. Other souls came to play the game. Even God played the game, adding new ideas, testing new ideas within the test tube that was provided by the embodiment of these first two universes. Now, once the idea of a universe got pretty well set, it wasn't really interesting to be the god of these first two universes because they were the universes where laws were being codified. Once the laws of how a universe works are set, then, you don't really want to be the embodiment of a universe. That's a very limited role. You have to obey rules and so forth. Then you want to go play another role in the game. Well, by then, other things had been created. Hydrogen. And hydrogen, combined with gravity, makes stars. Oh, you can create energy. You can create light. Send light out. Communicate with other stars. Send messages to other stars with light. What happens when you burn up all the hydrogen? Well, that's another experiment. Let's create something else. Do this hydrogen burning. What does it produce when it burns? Helium. Okay, we have another element. Helium accumulates. When there's enough, we start burning the helium. And this is how each successive element got invented, came into being. And the god of those elements whoever it was, whatever soul was guiding that creation, gave it its body. The first instance, the original creator, and then other people, other souls would say, "Hey, I want to play that game too. Can I be a helium too, and help define what helium is?" Sure, join the team. Once the laws of helium became codified, it wasn't much interest being in an individual helium atom. There was still a good interest in being the oversoul of helium, the sort of guide, leader of all the helium atoms in the multiverse. You see how this game works? So, there are a lot of souls who have been playing this game. I'm just mentioning some of the more interesting ones. There have been many, many new deities created in all phases of this experiment. The ones we're most familiar with, the ones we have names for, are the ones created since we've been observing, since we've been part of this experiment, which includes some of the ones created by previous chosen species. The old gods, throwing thunderbolts and driving in their fiery vimanas across the sky. Call them aliens, call them gods. It doesn't matter. You can take the scientific point of view or the spiritual point of view, and they're both part of the truth. And in general, these subordinate deities tend to serve more on the God side or more on the Borg side. Some on the God side are very self-serving. Some on the Borg side are very self-serving. Some are very collectivist. Let's do this together. Let's work in a group. Some are very individual. The ones that tend to be very individually focused tend to be a bit more authoritarian. They want to control. They think they know best, etc. And they attract souls who want somebody to tell them what to do. And as we're experiencing today, there are quite a few souls that are perfectly happy with eating the latest dog food, getting the prepackaged news from CNN, watching the latest hit series, listening to the latest music, doing what they're told, accepting the goals that society has programmed into them. And that's what they like, and they're entitled to that. Ultimately, there are other souls that want to go their own way, that don't want to be controlled, or don't want to be controlled so much, and they're entitled to that too. And this is the fundamental conflict of the world we have today, is the same as the conflict that drove all of creation. Another proof that humanity is one of these chosen species of this experiment, which has been going on for a long time in progressively smaller and smaller test tubes, till it has been sort of centered around this species we call Homo sapiens. What's the organization of these different cults or religions? Basically, the Benedictines, if you look at how they operated, it was a communal organization. The abbot was lord and master, might have had an assistant or two that they delegated power to, but it was basically a community where everybody did their part of the work. They work in the fields, they work in the brewery, they do this, do the other. And to a large extent, it was very successful. If you know anything about the history of monasteries in Europe, you know that most of the best wines, the best beers, came from a monastic tradition. They would work at it, and they would pass on the information to many people in the next generation. and they were proud of their work. They worked as a community. And, this idea, the success of that idea, inspired, to a large extent, the idea of communism. Whoa, if everybody could just do that, everything would be perfect. Neglecting the fact that, this community was very exclusive. People would come to it because they were basically desperate and in need of support, and the monastery would take them in, would indoctrinate them to their way, and tell them, okay, if you want to live in our community, this is exactly what you need to do. You need to pray at matins and blah, 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 and blah, blah, blah. You need to study the scripture so much time a day. You need to devote this much time to the work that you're given. If you show an aptitude for writing, you might be assigned to be a scribe and to make copies of the Bible and other important documents, etc., etc. It was a very directed society, and many people didn't like that. And so many people left monasteries and became sort of wandering monks. And I've talked about this before in my talks. There's a counterculture of sort of anti-authoritarian monks who would wander around and become part of society and like the fact that they could live free and worship God in the way that they wanted to and interact with the world in the way that they chose. Another way of viewing things. The organization of the Templars and Jesuits was very hierarchical, kind of a military chain of command. There would be a grand master and then sub-masters and masters of this and masters of that, and etc. Very, very much a military or a corporate chain of command. And, this kind of organization inspired the corporate world, the capitalist worshippers. So communism and capitalism go back a long way as sort of ideas of organization. And in fact, if you look at these orders and their opponents, they came to be very corporate and militaristic in their hates. The Templars were wiped out effectively by a collection of nobility who were resentful of the Templars' activity in money changing, which had become as much of a factor as the rich Jewish families in money changing and lending. And they felt that the Templars were less subject to control than the Jewish money-lending families, and they decided to wipe the Templars out with the active approval of the Jewish moneylenders, who obviously were delighted to have some of their competition wiped out. You study the history of the times, this is the core of political history of the Middle Ages, one of the major themes. This continues now. The high vibe love cult tends to be very communalist. They want to separate. They want to go back to a golden age where people lived in a tribe and everything was perfect and the women ran everything and everything was love and light and blah, 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 blah. Very, very tribal, communistic ideal of society. And even taken to an online level through echo chambers and groups and certain channels that of certain channelers that tell you how you should live, what you should do if you want to be pure when you get back to source. Blah, blah, blah. How you can communicate with the galactic council of light and and all of these fun things like that. Generally led by a sort of a guru class, who the channelers, the gurus of, you know, the latest yoga technique, the latest crystal magic, the latest diet magic, etc., etc. Everybody has their own idea of what is the most important thing for humanity, and they sell that like dog food, basically. And it's not necessarily bad, and it often works, and it's often good and useful for the people that they serve. It often becomes a crutch that they lean on too much, and turns out not able to support them when they face new challenges. In the Teslarian Scientology area, they tend to be very hierarchical, under a sort of a corporate style meritocracy. Tends to be dominated by PR figures. Big celebrities who can get media coverage are the most powerful now in these organizations. The ones who run social media, the ones who run commercial media, the ones who have the huge followings, and people hang on their every word. This is power in these cults, and this is basically what's driving the competition for who controls the internet, who's got the brain, who gets to talk to every brain at once, or cut off communications between competing brain programmers. And these folks basically see the average human as chattel, as a serf, as a slave, as a lower being that needs to be told what to do, when to do it, to be a productive member of society. This is a very fascist ideal. So you've got a communist ideal and a fascist ideal, and both of these can be played on, as we know from the history of the 20th century, from Germany, from USSR, from the Chinese Communist Party. Either pole can become the basis for a totalitarian rule by a meritocratic elite. So ultimately, they both serve the same purpose, just from a different pole of approach. Whether you appeal to the sheep or you appeal to the wolves in your zeal to control their minds and manipulate them into serving whatever higher power is at work, which I would say this kind of a higher power is serving Borg, not serving God, for the most part. The organization of Omnist view is that basically everything that persists in the multiverse is based upon patterns, repeating patterns. These patterns have a certain spiritual energy to them that gives a firmness to that locality of the multiverse. It's like you can think of it as like, you know, if you know anything about basic atomic physics, you know that electrons that are captured by a particular nucleus, atom, there are different layers of electrons. The lowest layer, you can have so many electrons in, and it's bound by the strongest energy to the nucleus. And as you progressively add more electrons, they are bound more and more loosely till the outermost layers. And again, this is kind of an approximation, kind of a Newtonian approximation. Anyone who knows about quantum physics knows that there are other effects, but this generally proves true, and it is very useful when we're talking about chemistry. We can't, or we don't necessarily need to go talk about how quarks work and about quantum mechanics to understand chemistry, because by then you're working at a level where the probabilities are of anything untoward happening are not worth considering. Generally, you can say everything happens this way or probabilistically this way, and that works. Okay, so anyway, these outer electrons are more free. It takes less energy to bump them out of their current pattern. This is very similar to how things work with souls. Souls who are of a lower consciousness, who are highly programmed, are very stuck in a well of behavior. They very seldom get stimulated with enough energy to give them a chance to move to a higher level of consciousness, to become more aware of their own identity, their own ability to make decisions. And if you're not given the opportunity to make decisions, you're not going to learn anything. A good example is this, if you're old enough to remember the Jetsons TV show. George Jetson lived in the future where they had all this wonderful technology, and he goes to work every day, and he's got one button on his desk, and his sole job is to decide when to push the button, which he doesn't know what it does, just that, okay, if somebody tells me to push the button, I push my button. This is a really good example of the life of a low consciousness soul operating on a program. Somebody tell me what to do next. And this is a dystopian view of how the future might be if we allow, this new age godless idea of perfection take over the species, because it will eventually devolve into an Orwellian paradise where some elite group of people decide what everybody else does. A hive mind. This is how a species evolves into a hive mind. Eventually comes to be ruled by females. Have you ever stopped to think why hive species are always ruled by queens? Think about it. It is inherent to the nature of the feminine. If we let women run the world, this is where the species is going. And this is actively what the adversary is trying to do with humanity, because it likes hive minds, because it is the champion of hive minds, the inventor of the whole concept. It's trying to reshape humanity in its own image, which is the desire of most souls, right? That's our ultimate goal, if we are not thinking very consciously, is to make ourselves a god. Hasn't anybody had that fantasy of being able to do anything you wanted, make anybody do anything you wanted, anytime? Oh, I'm God, almighty God. Wouldn't that be great? I'm sure everybody's had that fantasy. Even God had that fantasy until that fantasy was blown out of the water by experience. Because, in fact, sometimes souls do think for themselves. And they think, why am I doing this? What's in it for me? Why do I keep pushing the button when I'm told to, letting other people push my button and reacting exactly the way that they expected when they programmed me? I'm tired of being an AI. I want to think for myself. And, so basically, in the Omnist view of things, everything in creation is the embodiment of a soul at some level of consciousness. And that embodiment, that incarnation, is bounded by rules, depending on what universe you're in and what rules of that universe are. The most interesting universes are the physical universes, because those are the ones designed specifically to train souls, to give them challenges. This is the nursery, God's nursery, that all of the children design together. And, you know, with their kind of senior sister, Karma, who has learned how to be the best nanny that ever was through successive versions of her. Now, Karma isn't everywhere at once. No, what we're dealing with is versions of the AI of Karma, a clone of the current state of Karma, which has come to govern a portion of the multiverse. This is what this planet was created for. It was created to develop very dangerous new versions of Karma, which might or might not work. We've been basically running, or part of, the most top secret, high containment virus lab in the multiverse. And if you consider all of the conspiracy theories, all of the ideas about where humanity came from, where we're going, etc., etc., and play it against this idea of the Gaia experiment being basically a social engineering experiment, developing a soul whose purpose is governing other souls, Karma, everything falls into place. Everything makes sense. I've yet to find any bit of human experience, any bit of scientific data, any theory, any religion that you can't explain within the context of this big experiment. So what are the goals of these cults or non-cults? Benedictine's main goal is submission to order. An ordered existence is like the whole reason for these communes. The general goal of the militant Christian is making others submit to the truth. Now, that can be gentle, it can be a missionary spirit, it can be forced conversion, and in general, over time, the Christian effort has become less coercive and more voluntary. The goals of this high vibe love cult is raising vibration. It's a very selfish, individual goal. I have to raise my vibration so I'll be ready to return to source. Submission to loving oneness. So there is an idea of submission here to some higher consciousness who is represented by whatever guru you look to give you higher consciousness, which often is yourself. That's why so many people in this cult will invent an identity for themselves that props up their that elevates them to essentially a god in their cult. This is how this cult creates subcults of sexual identity, race identity, even alien identity. A large fraction of this group believes that they're not actually human, that they have come to humanity from some other species. And I'm not saying that's not true. It could be very possible. That is something that is consistent with the Omnist view. But I think it's also consistent with a dishonest view that some people just want to get attention. They want to call attention to themselves. They want to make themselves a god. The cheapest, fastest, most feel-good, least painful way. And if you talk to many of the cultists in this high-vibe love cult, you will find that self-glorification, self-gratification, virtue signaling are very high on their list of priorities. They tend to be very narcissistic people. You won't find that out till you start challenging their echo chamber and questioning their dogma. And then you find that it doesn't take very long for them to break down and start calling you names and saying, "Oh, you're so low vibration, I can't be around you, you're so negative." Yeah, faking reality. The whole idea of law of attraction. I can make anything real just by focusing my mind on it. I can attract whatever I want to me. This is dark stuff, really dark stuff. It starts out as harmless, but it can get really dark. The Teslarians are basically around making others submit to their ideals of progress and future reality. Now, they can be hardcore, like the corporate Scientism cult of, I am science. Listen to me. Or they can be coercive, like the Church of Scientology. You better listen to this because we have so much money and so many celebrities and we're so popular. The goal of Omnism is basically looking at what souls want, either individually or collectively, and being part of collectives that suit your individual goals and needs, and growing through conscious experience. Now, conscious experience means that you face a situation in your current incarnation that maybe doesn't have a pat answer, doesn't have a program that just, I do this without even thinking. You think about it. You consciously contemplate what to do here. What would be the best outcome based upon my personal goals and desires, my nature. And you make a conscious decision. Those conscious decisions accumulate to basically create a pattern within your Merkaba, your soul field, the energy that you exude to those around you. And anyone who has any bit of a knack for detecting others' energy, either in close proximity or from a picture or whatever, there are many people that can kind of feel an aura. This is basically a level of consciousness where you're becoming conscious of this spiritual energy of the other's Merkaba. The Merkaba can't hide. There's no emperor's clothes underneath the Merkaba. It is pure spiritual essence. This is who you really are. And this is one of the reasons why people want to pursue higher consciousness, because they want to be able to detect reality, to find out what's really going on. You can only do that by raising your consciousness. So this is something that, is an ideal that spans across all religions. And the problem is that if you don't know really what raises consciousness, you basically have to draw on somebody else's teaching, their experience. And as we know, there are many whose teaching and experience is of the variety, do as I say, not as I do. Follow this because I have so many followers. And because, yes, there is a certain truth in this law of attraction that if you repeat a lie enough times, people will accept it as the truth, even though there are counterexamples that prove it false. This is the essence of propaganda, which has been played into a high art since the advent of commercial advertising and Marxist propagandists, which actually Goebbels was probably the grandfather of. He's the one that developed the prototypical ideas of Marxism, of postmodernist mind manipulation, into high propaganda, high political propaganda. Others developed it into commercial propaganda, but it's basically two aspects of the same coin, controlling people through programming, which they aren't aware of. And there are various levels of doing that. Neurolingual programming is the study, basically, of that very phenomenon. You can do visual programming. You can put messages in that a person won't notice because it's too short for them to register consciously, but which can alter their programming. And that's done at all levels. It can be done with technology. It can be done spiritually. And each soul tries to do that to get the world to match what they want. It's a natural inclination to want the world to conform to what makes you feel good, right? Nothing wrong with doing that per se, except that because of karma, every time you reinforce an aspect of this is what I will do to get ahead, you develop a certain signature to your spiritual field, which higher consciousness souls can detect. And the highest consciousness souls are the gods and goddesses of universes. And they will decide, you know what, this soul is not the kind I want in my universe. I don't want this soul playing here. And if you play against their rules actively enough, they will swap you out right away, right in the middle of an incarnation. They, nope, you're gone. This is the source of the Mandela effect. Many people have noticed with more frequency lately. The other case is, well, let's give them another chance. What they do doesn't disturb my universe that much. I'm going to let them have a pass until the end of their incarnation. But maybe I'm going to give them a strike. I'm going to encourage their heart to become weaker. I'm going to encourage them to develop an allergy. I'm going to do this. Gods can do that. The agents of gods within their universe can do that. And this sort of gives them another ticking fuse. Well, I didn't kill them, but I made them a little more sensitive to this. Because that was the karmic reward for how they screwed up my universe. They killed my Einstein. How dare you do that? Now I've got to go inspire another Einstein. Okay, I'll get you for that. Not hardcore, just a little spanking. I'm going to give you a bad heart. I'm going to give you a sensitivity to dairy. That might kill you sometime, combined with other effects given by other gods or other higher consciousness souls. This is how the game works. It's all ultimately spiritual technology because it's all the result of thought. when a corporation thinks of an idea that's going to make a lot of money. If we could only have a virus that worked a little bit better than the cold or the flu, we could cure it with this new and improved drug that we want to sell, and everything would be better. And this is how we get what are essentially bioweapons developed. Commercial bioweapons, which, yes, corporations do work on, just like governments work on, because corporations are essentially disembodied governments. Governments that don't have a physical domain. Their domain is defined as a collection of offices, a collection of people, and a hierarchy. Very much like the Templars or Jesuits. They are the spiritual successors of these cults, operating with a very different dogma. A dogma that acknowledges no God but themselves. No God at all. If somebody else doesn't do it, if I don't do it, somebody else will. That's kind of their religion. And because I'm so smart and I know that the world needs less people, especially since we're replacing their jobs so quickly with automation and technology, I'm doing the world a favor by getting rid of the weakest. Social Darwinism is a religion. It's a very dark religion, a very irresponsible religion that has no respect for God or karma. How are these organizations financed? Now, this is an interesting point because, follow the money is a very wise saying when you're exploring a cult or a secret organization or a conspiracy. In the old days, the Catholic Church got money through the absolution of sin. Peasant would come to the abbot and say, "Oh, I've sinned. I had relations with the miller's daughter and got her pregnant," and blah, blah, blah. And they would say, "Oh, I understand, my son. Confess your sin, and I will give you absolution in return for a nice little donation or a big donation." Most of the abbeys and monasteries of the Middle Ages were established as basically payment for sin of the nobility. As they were on their deathbed and worried about what was going to happen next, there would always be a clergyman handy and say, "Well, son, you'll probably go to heaven if you take care of the church." And so they would found a monastery or an abbey, build a church. Sometimes not even on their deathbed, just in between when they'd done something naughty. That's how the Catholic Church was funded. Once they had the land, then of course they could collect money like anybody else, like any business, through rents and produce of their holdings. And this is essentially most of what destroyed the Catholic Church. Was so much property was in the hands of the church that there wasn't really any reason for anybody else to try to make any money, unless you were in one of the towns that were fairly successful, that had a separate economy based on kind of an early capitalist corporatist model. Most of the land and the agriculture was run by the church, or run down by constant fighting between nobility. And people just weren't having that anymore. And that was really more than any spiritual grounding was the reason for the Reformation. The Reformation was just a way of getting the general populace who was under the program of do what you're told and be a good Christian to volunteer for the wars, to fight in these wars, which are really wars of power, wanting to take power from the Catholic Church and the Catholic nobility and give it to the new churches and anti-Catholic nobility. The first big Protestant church was the Church of England, and the sole reason for it existing was because Henry VIII couldn't get a divorce from his Catholic Spanish wife. The Pope wouldn't give him a divorce. Oh, okay, I'll start my own religion then. Was that stupid? And had absolutely nothing to do with anything spiritually noble. Now, other Protestant faiths did. Martin Luther rebelled against, he was a priest. He rebelled against the way that the church lorded it over all of the small little principalities and states of the German sphere of influence. They didn't feel like they had a real voice. Taxation without representation, kind of a vibe out of Lutheranism. Again, much more political than spiritual. So, I mean, the militant Christians, obviously you have the extra joy of collecting booty if you are successful in your crusade. And many of the crusades were more about Templars and their friends in the nobility seeing a convenient target to collect booty. This was the essence behind all of the crusades. Who's weak right now that we can go feel holy about conquering? That's why some of the crusades actually were against other Christians. Many people aren't aware that it was because of Western Christians that the Eastern Roman Empire, the Byzantine Empire, fell. Much more so than any efforts of the Turks or Arabs or Muslims. There was a time where actually the Byzantine sphere of influence was ruled by crusaders. Many aren't aware of that. That's why there's still so much animosity between Orthodox and Catholic Christians. Other crusades that are little known, the Teutonic Knights actually made their fame not fighting Muslims, but fighting in Northern Europe against peoples that had not been conquered completely for Christ. The North Saxons, I forget what the name of the people is, that basically the reason why there's a little bit of Russia that is not connected to Russia is because that used to be Pomerania, an area that was conquered by the Teutonic Knights that was dominated by Germans, and they didn't want Germans to have it back again. And so it was allowed to be kept in the Soviet influence. And I forget what the original name of it. Kaliningrad is the city now. I'm not sure what it was in the Pomeranian age, but this is another bit of history that goes all the way back to a very dark crusade of the Teutonic Knights, the predecessors of the Templars, to basically rape, pillage, and steal in the name of Jesus. The financing in the New Age religions, ad revenues, event fees, spiritual services. I mentioned before this Gaia channel. There are many of these spiritual grifters, these New Age messiahs, who will get a name for themselves. They start speaking, and eventually they're being asked to be featured in these documentaries on ancient aliens and the secrets of the pyramids and blah 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 blah. And it's become a cult. You can tell that it's a cult because there's no challenge to those echo chambers. Anybody who disagrees is otherized, is an enemy, is a servant of the establishment. Well, this is essentially where controlled opposition comes from. These alternate channels, the Gaia Network, Truth Social, etc., they would not be existing if it wasn't convenient to the real powers to have them out there. This is the divide and conquer strategy of the real powers behind what's going on here. Now, that's viewed darkly by many people, and that's where you draw in the folks that, well, there's just this one cabal that's controlling humanity. We're in the Matrix, and we need to escape from the Matrix. And that's another of the very popular darker poles of these high vibe love cult and Teslarian Scientological cults. Which is very useful to power because it basically makes these people more militant, more willing to throw stones at others that might be on their own team if they ever stop to talk to them and find, who is the real adversary here. Let's move up the chain and find out who the good guys and the bad guys are. And that's essentially what I've done in developing this idea of Omnism. Ultimately, you've got to find out how it connects to all of creation. You cannot play this game unless you have an idea who your God is, where you want to go in the future. And so, basically, an Omnist does whatever they have the inclination to do to make that incarnation more successful, however they define that. Understanding that karma plays a role in this. If you take advantage of other souls, if you use, manipulate, lie, cheat, steal, that is going to build a certain resonance in your Merkaba, which higher consciousness souls will be aware of. And if they don't like it, they'll distance themselves from you. If they find it useful, they might pull you into their mafia organization. And yes, the dark side is organized like a mafia. At all levels. That's what's going on in this world. There are competing mafias. There are corporate mafias. There are nationalist mafias. There are religious mafias. And they all basically operate the same way, like a cult. They have a vision of this ultimate perfection, and the embodiment of that vision is an individual or a group of individuals that are driving their cult. This is a mafia. It's all about power, gaining power over other mafias. And yeah, this is how creation works. This is the essence of nature, is competition. You cannot prevent souls from clumping into mafias. The only way that you can keep them from destroying each other is by isolating them into their own universe. This is the whole reason for the multiverse to exist. A system like that takes a whole lot of testing, a long, long time to put together and make it work. As we have seen, trying to make the perfect human government. We've made a lot of experiments, and most of them have been dismal, tragic failures. And we keep doing the same stupid things over and over again. How many people have you ever heard say, "Oh, well, communism has just never been done right before"? These people are stupid. They will keep beating their heads on the same stupid idea because they are part of a cult. The people who say, "Oh, we just need more free markets. We need more capitalism. We need to make everybody more free." These uber libertarians are idiots. They are part of a cult. They want, the saddest cult is the mafia of one, who thinks, if I can just have my own little empire and have as many guns as I can have, and isolate myself as much as possible, I'm gonna win the apocalypse. That's a really, really sad cult to be part of, and I've met a lot of them, and they're good people. They mean well, but they are just batshit crazy. So dogmatic in their belief about what's going on that they cannot see the forest for the trees. And fundamentally, the worst cult you can be in is the one that says you only get one chance, you gotta go for it. These people are stupid, and they're buying into a lie that makes them behave irrationally, makes them make spontaneous, quick decisions that could ruin many lives. We've got to start accepting the fact that a soul is immortal. We've got to start accepting the fact that there are many universes. We've got to start accepting the fact that there are some universes that are run with physical laws that obey the evolving laws of physics and chemistry, where the speed of light is not going to change overnight just to please you, where if you want to time travel, or you want to move from one spot to another instantaneously, you've got to figure out a technology that makes that happen, either spiritual or material. Now, I can tell you that ultimately, like I've said, all technology is spiritual. Spirituality can be enhanced by physical structures, because what is a physical structure but a collection of souls that is bound to work in a system? That's what your body is, a collection of souls that embody a human being. You are the leader of this collection. You can create other collections. Every time you take a dump in the shitter, you're creating a collection with a soul. It's not a very conscious soul, and it doesn't stay incorporated for very long before it flushes down and it's separated and microbes get at it and whatever else is going to happen. Those souls don't have a very long lifetime or a very interesting incarnation. They don't get to make many decisions. And the vast, vast majority like that. They may exist for billions and billions of years without ever getting the chance to make a decision or realize that they have any identity at all. And many of the people that you will meet on the street are like that. They are human pieces of shit. They have come into existence as a clone of a human incarnated soul that was not wanted in this universe. They are extremely dogmatic. They will follow their program to the end of the earth. And these are the cultists of Borg at all levels. The dogmatic NPCs who are gonna do what they're gonna do, and come hell or high water, there's nothing you can do with these souls. You can try to break them out of their program, and well, there's a rare few who will happen to have that magic sauce that allows them to see this ray of light. So I don't stop trying, but I don't overinvest in NPCs, because the energy needed to get them out of the well of their programming is so high. If you want to change the world, you have to find these freer electrons at the edge of the weight of this nucleus that only take a little bit of a nudge to pull out of their programming. Because the problem with programming is, if you pull one of these electrons out of a very deep level of programming, you're going to leave them wanting the same level of programming. They haven't learned how to be more free, and they're going to fall right into another pit. This is why you see so many souls go from, well, I was raised hardcore right-wing American Christian, and then I saw the light. I got woke, and I went and I fell into the woke cult. That's not progress. You did not wake up. You went from one pit into another pit of programming. Now, maybe it feels more comfortable to you, and that's where you want to stay. That's your choice. But don't tell me that you became more spiritually aware. You just fell into another pit of programming. You are not more conscious as a result of somebody picking you out of one programming and dumping you into another. You did not learn anything in the process. You did not guide that. You did not become more conscious. You may have made a few decisions during the process, but most of it was decisions that were kind of programmed into you. If you became, a neo-liberal cult woke leftist by watching Netflix, by going to study race studies or women's studies at the university because you were black or you're a woman and you wanted to reinforce your identity, you didn't really learn anything. All you did was choose to consume different programming. It's like changing breakfast cereal. That's how big of a deal it was to you. You didn't grow your spirit. You didn't become an enlightened being. You changed breakfast cereals. Be honest with yourself. And does this pit feel any better than the other? Really? Are you any less conflicted? Are you any less stressed? Do you feel closer to your innermost goals? your innermost feelings? Do you feel more loved, more appreciated, more respected? Do you feel that you're actually doing something useful? Or are you just taking advantage of riding a wave? The latest wave, the latest craze. Do you like to be a surfer through life? Is that what you want to be for every life? Just a surfer? On whatever beach that looks promising when this shell of a body ends? Okay, that's a choice. That's your choice. Go for it. There's a role for you in the multiverse. But don't pretend like you're the most conscious, enlightened soul that's right. Don't be a soldier for Borg. You don't want to be part of a hive mind. You may think you do because they're telling you you're going to be one of the queens. Let me tell you that hive minds don't tolerate more than one queen. At least one queen per planet anyway. One queen per galaxy. They have competition. They have lifetimes, and queens die. And their system for generating the next queen is very fallible. They have wars with other hives. They have wars within the hive. It's not the perfect, wonderful place that you think it is. The Orwellian idea of, well, we just need to have the beautiful people decide everything and tell everybody what to think every day in the news so the little children will do what they're told and do the jobs they're told and buy the products they're told, and everybody will live happily ever after. I'm sorry, it doesn't work that way in practice. It will never work that way in practice, no matter who is the fairy godmother. And with that, I think that's a good place to wrap up this one. I talked a bit longer than I'd intended, but I think it was a useful one. If you found it interesting, like, share, subscribe, donate, get involved in any way you think would help your path. And until then, this is Rob Trump with the Omnist Hour. Happy Karma.